Throughout time, people across the world told each other tales of how they came to be, of heroes and monsters, romance and tragedy, death and rebirth. Mythology helped shape the ancient world, explaining the unexplainable. This is Mythology Unleashed. American folklore has no shortage of giants, both literally and figuratively speaking. Deep in the forested areas of the continent, there rang tales of Paul Bunyan, a lumberjack who stood at 63 axe handles high, and whose exploits shaped the American landscape. From the South were stories of John Henry, a once enslaved man said to have stood head and shoulders taller than all others, and who battled a great injustice for the working man. But from the rocky coasts of New England came stories and sea shanties of a ship captain, 30 feet high, with incalculable charm, whose nautical adventures would change the maritime world. Captain Alfred Bulltop Stormalong. They say that the man who would one day become Captain Stormalong was beached as a baby, already 3 fathoms tall, on the shores of Cape Cod, Massachusetts. According to one telling, he outgrew Cape Cod and made his way to Boston, where he signed aboard the first ship that would take him at the age of 12. From here, it was said that he was responsible for the tradition of referring to seamen as able-bodied by signing his name on his first shipboard employment contract as Stormalong A.B. As one may imagine, being a giant, though cumbersome and perhaps awkward in terms of managing himself upon a vessel, Stormalong's great strength and endurance came in handy on many occasions, being able to do the work of many normal sailors. By the time he had reached adulthood, he stood some 30 feet in height and was the finest sailor ever to live. It would not be long before Stormalong became the captain of his own clipper ship, sometimes called the Corser, other times the Tuscarora. Whatever the ship's name may be, it was said to be so wide that it could not sail into Boston Harbor, and so tall that the mast was hinged into the middle so that it could be taken down to avoid the sun and the moon whenever they passed by. Her keel was so deep that no harbor in the world could take her, so she spent all her time in deep water. The ship's deck was so long that the sailors had to ride horses at a full gallop from stern to stern when it was their turn to keep watch. Captain Stormalong was the only man strong enough to handle the wheel of the Corsair, and it took all of his muscle to prevent the ship from knocking down smaller Caribbean islands whenever a hurricane blew into the ship. One legend tells of how the Corsair went through the English Channel, but because the passageway was so tight, old Stormalong had his sailors coat the entire outside of the ship with soap. After the ship slid through, albeit barely, much soap had scraped off one side of the ship on the cliffs of Dover. Henceforth, the location was forever known as the White Cliffs of Dover. Another story describes how the good captain became severely inebriated after drinking barrels of rum, that he decided he needed to travel to the Pacific Ocean in a hurry. In his drunken state, he recklessly rammed the hull of his ship straight through the coast of Panama, clean through to the Pacific Ocean. The channel dug by Stormalong's ship would go on to become the Panama Canal. Though it seemed as if Alfred Bulltop Stormalong was the king of the ocean itself, there was one obstacle that constantly stood in his way. The Kraken, a large, cephalopod-like monster originating from Norse legend, was his archenemy. With multiple thrashing tentacles covered in deadly suckers, an appetite for sailors, and an aggressive attitude, the Kraken seemed like the perfect challenge for the gigantic captain. Over the course of his lifetime, Captain Stormalong would engage the Kraken in combat several times, with neither truly gaining the decisive victory over the other. Each time, the Kraken would somehow escape the grasp of the giant sailor. The manner in which Stormalong dies changes from tale to tale, but each story of his death was quite colorful and boisterous, much like the way the great captain had lived. Some say that Captain Stormalong died in a final battle with the Kraken, where he initiated a massive whirlpool so strong that it trapped both the monster and himself, eventually killing the pair. In another story, Stormalong angered a steamship captain by dumping water down the ship's funnel in an attempt to put out what he thought was a dangerous fire on the deck. The steamship captain challenged Stormalong to a transatlantic race. The aged Stormalong won the race by several miles, but the stress of handling the heavy wheel through the difficult voyage killed him. In a third supposed ending to his life, Stormalong was sailing past Florida when he encountered a tremendous hurricane that tore through his ship. Ships sailing nearby were being tossed about by the heavy waves, so Stormalong went overboard and piled as many of the boats as he could onto his own ship, saving countless lives. When the storm finally died down, he unfurled the sails of his ship, seeing if they could be repaired. A great wind, the last blow of the hurricane, hit the sails, lifting Stormalong and his ship into the sky, never to be seen again. In yet another ending to his life, albeit a more comical one, describes a time when his hunger was greater than usual and led him to eat so much food, namely a breakfast of 6 sharks, that he suffered terminal indigestion, causing his magnificent appetite to finish him off. No matter the manner of how he died, it was said that Stormalong was buried at sea, and Davy Jones himself opened his locker to accept the good captain's body. Giants of America were not just limited to lumber yards or railroad construction sites, but the high seas as well. Captain Alfred Bulltop Stormalong beached on a New England shores a baby already 3 fathoms tall, who grew up to become a sailor in Boston and then a captain of a massive clipper. Shanties of Captain Stormalong and his adventures, of shaping coastlines and battling giant sea monsters, have been sung by sailors for generations, to both pass the time and motivate their hard-working minds.